Hello, hello. Okay, now we got it going. Alright. Good morning, everybody, or wherever it is in your part of the world. Let's go through the agenda. If you refresh it, I think I updated it pretty recently. The first one is testing and fuzzer updates. So we'll start with Guido talking about the fuzzer updates, if you want to go ahead. Oh, Guido, I think you're on mute if you're talking. Hey, Guido, can you hear us?
Check, check. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Hey, can everybody hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yep.
All right, then we'll start on the first agenda item. Let's go with fuzzer updates with Guido. And Guido, if you just want to go ahead and just explain improvements or any news or any cool things you want to talk about relating to the fuzzer.
Okay, so well, the past couple of months I've been working on a fuzzer. It has been fuzzing the Go and Rust implementations of the VM. It has two objectives. One is consensus issues, so codes running in both VMs that leads to a different state that would lead to change steps. And the other objective is denial of service. So we found both kinds of issues with fuzzers. And currently, I'm working on integrating CPP Ethereum into the fuzzer, so it will be fuzzing three different VM implementations. The fuzzing repository is currently private, but we want to make it public in a couple of weeks, I think. And I think we will release a blog post and describe the technical details of the fuzzer because we think people will find it interesting. So that is one thing I've been working on. The other thing is the Bignum fuzzer. It was actually a private project of mine, but I found a bug in Go, an exponentiation of Go, and I asked Martin if I could work on it in Ethereum time, so I did. But it's also very important.
Hey, Guido, could you get closer to the microphone? It's a little bit hard to hear.
Sure. Can you hear me? Is this fine?
Can everyone else hear him? It might be on my side.
He is very quiet.
Very quiet. Oh, I don't know what the problem is.
Oh, there we go. We can hear you now.
Okay. So I've been also working on a Bignum fuzzer. It tests the Bignum implementations of Go and Rust and C++ and so on. So it's very important that these are all aligned, that there aren't any differences in computations. So I've been working on that. And next up is we've been talking about smart contract fuzzing, but there aren't any clear plans yet about that. And I've been talking with Martin about fuzzing the network stack of Geth, because if there would be any problem in the network stack that could lead to denial of service, that would be a problem. So we want to do that next.
Awesome. The work that you all have already been doing is really, really cool. And I know we have some more people, such as Anton, coming on to help a little bit with that repo. So I think it's real promising.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. So if there's not anything else on that, let's go to the new transaction test folder structure. So on the agenda, there's a link to that. If you guys want to kind of see while Dimitri's talking what he's talking about. So Dimitri, you can go ahead.
Hi. So I was thinking to implement the final test that we still don't have in a general form is a transaction test. So as we're planning to create changes to the transaction protocol, and we have many forks, so I think we need that general transaction test. One source file describing the test, and this source file produce a general transaction test which contains the result on every fork. So you could just take the RLP of such transaction and either accepted or rejected, and that would be a new transaction test. So I changed the folder structure to be more representative. So I selected new categories like tests for each individual field. So I think it will be easier to find like data tests, value tests, and other fields. Also, I think if in the future we decide to change amount of fields or transaction folder, it will be easier with a new general transaction test, as you just read the RLP. So that's what I was working on. And I think it will be live by the end of this week.
Okay, great. We can add an agenda topic for the meeting after this to kind of check in on it, but it looks good so far. Great, thanks for the update. Agenda item number 2. So Yoichi had an idea to add CC, I think it's CC0 notices to EIPs. That's where you say copyright and related rights are waived via Creative Commons 0. So I think that's a good idea. Is anyone in the room familiar with that enough to know if we can put that on previous EIPs automatically, or is that something that we need to request from the author of the EIP for each EIP we want to add that to?
I believe at least a written permission from the original authors.
Okay. So yeah, that makes sense. For future EIPs, I think we should have that either as a requirement or as something that we highly suggest. So that might be pretty good. Any other comments on that, Yoichi?
So yes, for the incoming ones, I would require this copyright waiver or whatever, and otherwise I wouldn't much. And then there are some EIPs that are already merged without these copyright waivers. I will try to get them. The first one is EIP number 1 process, and each EIP should contain author, number, whatever. This one doesn't contain this copyright waiver, so now I ask Hudson and Casey about this, and then proceed from there.
Sounds good. We can also
and then after this, I can already edit this EIP number 1 to contain an instruction about this copyright thing.
Yeah, if you can do a pull request on that, that'd be awesome. And I'm already good on adding that to EIP1, and I'm sure Casey and Martin Beasy, who are the other authors on that EIP, would be fine with it as well. But we'll ask them anyway to get explicit permission.
I opened a pull request about it, and on the pull request, you can say sounds fine, and then that will count as a written permission to me.
Okay, sounds good. I'll be sure to do that. And is there anything else with that agenda topic? Anybody else have opinions on adding that? Is there someone, and if you can think of it later, we can add it as an item next week, but does anyone have any qualms with Creative Commons 0? Okay, great. So the next item is a new project that Paolo wants to discuss called JSON RPC Proxy Eth Agent. There's a link for the discussion and for the proof of concept alpha release. So Paolo, you can go ahead. Okay. Pavel, we can't hear you. Are you muted? We heard a little bit of static. Oh no. Okay. If your mic's broken, we'll skip that one and wait till it gets fixed again and then go back to it. We're hearing bits of static, so... Alright, we'll skip that one for now. So, the next item, Ben Edgington, who works on, I think, the Pegasus team, the low-level protocol development team at Consensus, the blockchain studio, commented a couple days ago and said, is it a reasonable place to discuss and add to the agenda this concern about the GitHub yellow paper? So if you click on the link on 4, it gives the full picture, but I'll just read through this real quick and then we'll go over it step by step. Pardon me. So the main question is, does it remain the case that the yellow paper is intended to be Ethereum's formal specification? If yes, then it should be noted that the yellow paper is currently significantly out of date. So what's the plan to bring it up to date post-Byzantium? What's the process for ownership and maintaining it going forward? Should it be made part of the EIP finalization process? And in order to facilitate the finalization process, should EIPs be required to be included in a pull request for the yellow paper if relevant before they are accepted? And if consensus failures are discovered, like during fuzz testing, how do we make sure that the yellow paper is updated where necessary? And then if it is not the case that the yellow paper is not continue to be Ethereum's formal specification, what replaces it? And is it worth maintaining as a resource that is descriptive rather than prescriptive? If so, the above questions will still stand. So this is a bigger one, but I think this is important and has a lot of good questions in it. So let's go through and just kind of generally talk about our feelings on the yellow paper. Because I don't think we can answer everything in either one or subsection 1 or subsection 2 without first kind of going over what the current state is and what we feel about that. So I can kind of give a little bit of information on the current state, and then Yoichi can also provide some context because he has been working a lot on the yellow paper via pull request. So right now the yellow paper is out of date. If I understand correctly, I don't even think that it's Homestead compatible completely. There are a few mistakes there. The process and ownership for maintaining the yellow paper currently is Gavin Wood accepting pull request. And before we go into whether it should be part of the EIP finalization process, there is what some people consider to be an issue, that the yellow paper does not currently have a copyright. And because of that, depending on jurisdiction, that leaves open the possibility that the author of the yellow paper, which is Gavin Wood, could potentially use the fact that there's not a copyright notice against people wanting to make changes or copy the yellow paper and put it on their website. So, and when I say make changes, what I mean is make changes and then paste them to, for instance, another repository or to a website that hosts someone else's version of the yellow paper that's a copy. So that kind of brings up the question of where to go from there. But if the yellow paper does get sorted out as far as copyright and other issues some people might have, I think it's a good idea for it to be part of the EIP acceptance process where relevant, personally, and also updated if fuzz testing finds problems. So just to summarize what I just said, the yellow paper is out of date. The ownership and maintaining process currently is that Gavin Wood maintains the yellow paper and accepts pull requests from other community members, and there are some concerns about copyright. So Yoichi, you've talked a lot about the yellow paper in the past. Did you have any comments about that?
Well, basically you covered everything, but the biggest concern is the lack of license. So, well, I'm not really sure who can, legally merge pull requests because yes, Gavin did, and he's written as his name is on the paper as the author, but the paper also contains paragraphs written by other people as well. So, so legally it's a big mixture of people, and then I think whoever who believes to have made a huge contribution to the yellow paper can have a veto, at least to try to stop modifications or whatever. I think in the current status, it's fairly dangerous to yellow paper modifications before protocol changes, or if we put the yellow paper in any kind of formal procedure, then some vetoes, right? Veto decisive right to the copyright holders of the yellow paper, whoever they are. So it's kind of very dangerous.
Okay, so, and just to make sure I understand, so two things you mentioned, or one thing you mentioned was that there's multiple authors on the yellow paper. Did I hear that correctly?
I'm not sure. So how much, I mean, writing one sentence maybe doesn't count, while writing one paragraph might count. I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer. And
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, nobody knows until somebody make a
Currently, they're
lawsuit. So,
listed as contributors to the yellow paper. They're all on the GitHub contributors list. I don't know if there's other contributors we have to consider, but this would really just involve reaching out to these 29 people and asking them for written consent. So that's not an unusual thing, but I will point out that somebody should reach out to Gavin ahead of time and get prior authorization from him, because previously when there was an attempt to relicense CPP Ethereum, he was the one who blocked that.
Yeah, that's true. And I know that people have reached out to Gavin about this issue, and he hasn't acted on it so far. I'm not sure the details of that, so I won't speculate or put words into anybody's mouth, but I will say people have mentioned this to him, so he's somewhat aware of it. The other thing is, how out of date is the yellow paper, Yoichi? Because I know you do a lot of the pull request.
it's 1 year old, so it's before it's before Shanghai attacks, basically.
Okay.
I think it's worth talking about. So there's a couple of things. The yellow paper doesn't attempt to be a complete spec of everything necessary to build a client. So it only reflects the current state of Ethereum. So if you want to build something that can sync the chain before the current hard fork, then you're out of luck. You need to get out of banned information, and there's actually no formal specification for that information other than older versions of the yellow paper, and even then you don't know the fork block numbers and so on. The wire protocol and other critical things about building a client are also out of scope, and I know a lot of people, myself included, feel that the yellow paper is very obscurantist and difficult to read. So for my part, I would love to see an effort for a formal spec for Ethereum other than the yellow paper, and for that to become the canonical specification. But like most people who want it, I don't have time to actually do that myself.
Yeah, and I
I
know.
am evaluating
Oh, go ahead, Yoichi.
KEVM. I am evaluating KEVM people from Illinois have written a formal specification that can be executed, that can run test cases. So, I mean, it contains the fork block numbers and everything necessary to run blockchain tests. I'm evaluating this as an alternative.
Sorry, what does?
KEVM.
I just posted a link to it in the chat. It's called KEVM, and it is a formal specification for the EVM written in K, which is a language. And I think, Yoichi, you mentioned that you can actually run tests off of this pretty well, right?
Yes, and when you open this repository, the markdown files are the specification. Actually, the markdown files contain code snippets, and these code snippets run the test cases, but the overall document is a markdown document. It's, the format is, I think that the intention is to make it as a specification that can be read from the beginning to end. Content-wise, these English sentences are sometimes like comments to the code, but this can be improved, I think, and this one is licensed properly.
Okay, and you said this one is licensed. Did you mention what it was licensed under? I'm trying to find it on the repo.
It's Creative Illinois license, and so they told me it's like MIT, but to me it looked like BSD, so it's worth checking.
Based on a quick glance, it looks quite promising to me. I think it needs more informative text so that it's readable without having to understand the entire language it's defined in, but I think it looks like a really promising route forward to me.
Yeah, it's I think it's headed by Evan Hildebrandt, who's a really smart guy, and I've talked to him a number of times. So he he knows what he's doing.
It's licensed under something called UIUC/NCSA. And if it's executable as a test suite, then that's even better.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty interesting. Okay, so going back to the actual agenda questions, or the questions that... oh, go ahead, Pavel.
Yeah, the license is the same that LLVM is licensed on. If you want some examples of other projects licensed on the same one.
Did you say the LLVM?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
So it's not so exotic as you may think, but it's not the mainstream as well.
Yeah, so are you familiar with the license? Do you consider it permissive?
It's some kind of BSD-like, but I don't know the details exactly. Actually, the LLVM is considering Apache 2.1, but the switch seems to be quite hard to do with the hundreds of contributors there, but it's probably the same level. Apple is fine with that, so it's kind of permissive.
Yeah. Any other comments? Yeah, so I think EIP should be included in whatever formal specification ends up being the one that's mainly used, or maybe even, you know, in any, like at least one of the specifications. It kind of depends on how strict we want to be at the EIP process. So we've kind of answered the question about what could replace the formal specification of Ethereum, and if it's worth maintaining as a descriptive resource rather than prescriptive. Nick, you kind of touched on that to say that you think that because it's not up to date, you find it more descriptive, I would say.
Well, I think it's a very bad descriptive resource because it's very hard to read.
I see.
To add to that, like the KEVM document is something where while I don't necessarily know the syntax for K, it's something that I can learn. But to actually, like, I don't actually feel confident that I could contribute to the Ethereum yellow paper and get all of the, I don't know how to write the language that's in the Ethereum yellow paper accurately.
That is...
With this, it feels like something.
What? It's that sciencey language. LaTeX?
It's mathematical. It's just mathematical notation, but what it really comes down to is the ability to turn specs into that mathematical notation, which is something that, well, I'm not an expert on, and I got a math degree. So I suspect if we went with the yellow paper, we would have a much harder time keeping it up to date because there's a limited number of people who are going to be capable of actually contributing the pull requests to update it.
Interesting. Yeah, I see your point there. So I think that we should bring Gavin into this conversation just to see where his opinion lies, to see if he wants to change the copyright or work towards something like that. And either way, KVM is going to continue to be developed, is my understanding. And so if that's the case, then we may not even need to, you know, do anything, and we can just see where the community and where the developers start picking the standard from. So it might be just something where consensus kind of wins out.
I feel like we need a formal standard. We need something where if there is a bug between two clients, we can say, yes, this one is correct because it follows the standard. Or if neither of them do, we can fix the standard or fix the clients. As long as I don't think we can entirely punt to just relying on community consensus for this.
Yeah. Hudson, maybe you can comment on this. Were we to be able to, where we have a decision right now as to, you know, okay, KVM is going to be the standard, the yellow paper is going to be the standard, or whatever. Is this something that could fall under like dev grants to essentially fund some entity going ahead and getting this up to date, because that's really one of the big problems here is getting us back up to date to current, I guess.
Yeah, incentivization is definitely important. So for those unfamiliar, Dev Grants is a program that the Ethereum Foundation ran that gives grant money to projects that help the underlying protocols and sometimes projects in the ecosystem. So I believe there's been 2 runs of Dev Grants. The latest one was completed in 2016. And right now, Dev Grants is currently not up. There are discussions to bring it back and to have a new class of Dev Grants recipients. But as of right now, there are no timelines or any other information for that, just things that I've heard about. So that is a really good idea, though. I agree.
I'd also be curious to know whether there's any way to run KEVM against the state tests, because we have a very comprehensive set of state tests, but no real proof that they actually line up with any sort of specification. And it would be good to, certainly for writing future tests as well, to know whether they line up with the formal spec.
Nick, looking in the KEVM,
they can already execute general state test and blockchain tests, both formats.
You said it was compatible with both, Yoichi?
Yes. Well, I mean, they added the JSON parser and they added the ECDSA recover and so on just to do that.
Cool. Okay. What were you saying, Piper?
I was saying that looking at the repo, it looks like they have some support for the state tests already.
Great. I mean, I'm liking this more and more personally.
Yep, definitely an interesting project. Are there any other comments on the yellow paper stuff?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to have Everett Hillenbrand invite him to the next All Core Dev and let him present it a bit.
Okay, that does sound like a good idea. Yoichi, do you have a contact directly with Evan? I think I can get a hold of him if not.
I think Case.
No, not more than a Git conversation. I mean, of course, I can send him a message with the next core dev schedule.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you had already talked to him, because I know you keep up with some of the KVM team, or in the past you've talked to them. It might have just been during previous events, though. Okay.
Inviting KVM people as well.
Cool. Yeah, so one of us will reach out to Evan. That's not an issue. Any other comments on this? Next steps are basically going to be reach out to Gavin, reach out to Evan, and get them on one of the core dev calls to discuss this further. Dimitri, did you have a comment on the EVM code description?
Yeah, you mentioned that it is unreadable in the current state, so I tried to describe it with English, how each individual opcode is working. So I started this document, I posted a link in the chat. So maybe it's easier to understand from those descriptions.
Okay, that sounds good. So if anyone's interested in that transition, that sounds good. Oh, Afri reached out to Gavin. Thanks, Afri. So hopefully he'll be on a future call or just let us know what his opinion is. Cool. Any other comments on this one? Okay. The next item, we're going to actually go back to item number 3 because Paul's mic's working. If you want to go ahead with that.
Yes, this is just a note. In the process of actually removing some components, some CPP Ethereum that we are not interested in maintaining, there was idea to actually move them to separate project that can somehow share some of the components that are not critical to the Ethereum node. And in the description, there's in the agenda, there's a description GitHub issue that there's some discussion on that, and also a prototype I've done in Python. So the first feature I would like to have there is HTTP server for RPC requests, so we don't have to include HTTP server in every client. And there are some other ideas what can be added there later on. So if anyone is interested in having something like that, or it also might be a candidate for dev grants, as dev grants were mentioned in this meeting already, but I just wanted to share this, and that's it.
So on the topic of kind of separating out components in the CPP client, what's an example of some of the other ones that are being separated, or is this one of the first ones?
Yeah, this is mostly the first one. We don't also. I'm not sure we're going to support Whisper. So yeah, the other components actually question: can we get up to date with the current state of the art with some subsystems we already have? And sometimes answer is yeah, we'd like to, and sometimes answer is no, we don't have resources at the moment to actually upgrade something like Whisper, for example. So we are preparing a roadmap for the next like half a year, and there are some issues. So there are some upgrades listed there. The other thing I was considering is actually account management, but that's probably a bit more complex. So we actually don't have to, if you have the proxy that handles RPC, you don't actually have to have an account management inside the node, because the proxy can actually sign transactions for you and somehow change personal RPC requests to raw RPC requests. So this is also the component we are considering that can be actually shared between some of the clients.
Great. Okay, cool. And yeah, that's interesting that you're branch taking out Whisper.
Other idea is to actually have support for if stats, because what we have currently is some Node.js module that is not maintained anymore, and it's actually hard to get it to work. So I know the Go have the implementation of that. So if we can share that implementation and also move it to this shared like tooling project that also can be used easily by different nodes implementations.
Awesome. Anybody have comments on that?
So I think it's a great idea, and I remember that like when I was working on a C++ team over 2 years ago, integrating HTTP and cross-platform support for it was like a great hassle, and like the HTTP support itself, it brought a lot of unnecessary dependencies. So I think that's a great idea. Regarding the proxy, I see one issue with this approach. So currently, if I recall correctly, there is no way to sign a raw message using your private key because through the RPC, because basically if sign is, whenever you call if sign, is prepending some arbitrary message before the data that you want to sign. So I see this might be the only issue with the proxy. But apart from that, I feel like it's a great improvement to C++ client.
I'm not exactly sure I have a complete thought here, but related to the issue with eSign, I think that just highlights, I don't know, I like to see nodes moving further away from account management and not necessarily having account management features as an expected default, because, well, that's just one extra bit of security overhead that puts on creators of Ethereum nodes, and account management is a really complex thing, and even trying to standardize account management is complex because we're still in the early stages and there's a lot of experimenting to be done. So if this motivates us to put some further distance between nodes and account management, I would actually see that as a positive thing.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, so we're planning to move account management away from Gap in a couple of steps. Do it slowly, but I have been implementing a separate account management tool, which has a public API, which doesn't take any passwords at all. Instead, it is only for user. The user needs to interact with a trusted UI that the signer has. And a remote node can submit transactions or data to be signed, and the user can then sign it through this key. I think it works kind of like Parity already does, but it's easier. It's pretty easy to move to some separate machine or to some USB armory or even an offline machine if you walk with keys. But yeah, moving away account management from the node is definitely in the plan. And if it can be reused, for example, by Python or whatever, I think that's a great win.
Cool. Merrick, did you have a comment? I saw you unmuted for a second.
No, I just wanted to say that I completely agree with Piper.
Great. Any other comments on any of this? Okay, moving on to the next item, Proof of Authority Testnet Unification update. Piper, is there any update on your end for that? That's something we talked about last time, about either creating a new Proof of Authority testnet based on Casper or something related.
No, there hasn't been any movement at all. I've had a crazy busy week, and I'm hoping to actually initiate that this week. So nothing to report.
Okay. Pardon me. Next, we'll have core team updates. So feel free to give any updates for your client, improvements or releases or things like that. We'll start with Parity. So Afri or Merrick, feel free.
Okay, so maybe I'll start briefly with the party codebase itself. Currently we are working on release 1.9. It's not going to have any major new features. So we are mostly working on stabilizing stuff because recently we've added multiple new features which were not well tested, and the number of issues in our GitHub significantly increased. So we are working on those issues, and we are also working on improving our database layer. Hopefully Party 1.9 will have a new database for accounts and code. Creating, for example, snapshots or just processing transactions inside VM should be significantly faster, because the read operations from the disk will be up to 10 times faster than they currently are. And apart from that, we are also working on party multisig issues. So we are currently mostly internally preparing a list of different approaches how we could address this problem. and we would like to add this thing to add the discussion about the proposals that we will present to the agenda on the next core devs meeting. And we are not, like we'll not try to push forward any of those proposals. We just want to discuss them with the community and with you, and see where we can go from there.
Okay.
And that's it from me. I don't know if Afri, you have anything to add? Okay.
Yep. Afri, do you have anything to add? If not, I think we're good on parity.
I think Afri has no microphone. Yeah.
Oh, no microphone. Yep, I see that now. No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, but feel free to add that to next week's agenda. I'll try to put up this agenda earlier so y'all can add stuff to it.
Yeah.
So I'll be doing that. Thanks for the update. Geth team. I think that'd be Martin or Nick in this case.
I've been working on a lot of external stuff, so I'm not in a good position to give an update on Geth, unfortunately.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm not really prepared for that either, but we recently rolled out a new release, nothing major. Something we're working on is improving the tracing, so it will be a lot more efficient to do tracing and do continuous tracing of several blocks and span of blocks. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Well, Peter is away on a vacation now, so more updates in 2 weeks.
Okay, no problem. Let's see. We got the C++ team. That'd be Christian or Pavel.
Yeah, it's quite quiet here as well. Still in the post-Mexico mode, and so we're mostly cleaning up all stuff related to Byzantium hard fork, some reviewing some old issues, and also usually updating the IPs. And me and Andre are preparing we're having some discussion about some roadmap for bigger steps in the CPP Ethereum team. That doesn't include the test work done by Dimitri.
Okay, thank you. Dimitri, did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, speaking of which, you asked about a function that executes single test without checking a filter, so it's now done. You could just type test each and specify single test. Then you specify a test case name as usual, but then you could provide another argument is a path to a JSON file, and doing it this way will not check the existence of a filter file. Also, you could use create random test option with another argument, additional argument to create random tests, which specifies options file in which you could describe which probabilities will be used for generating a random test. That's mostly to Holyman and Guido.
Okay. Cool shout out to Martin and Guido. Sweet. Next we have Ethereum J, Anton, or Harmony, I should say.
Yeah, hello. So in Ethereum J, we migrated the client onto the RocksDB, and so we are going to make the same trick as was made in Parity to avoid rep count in DB. So this should significantly speed up the importing of blocks. So I think Mikhail should finish this on the next week. And also Dmitry joined our team again. So he returned back integration with Hive. So as far as I know, Ethereum J was merged into Hive repository. So that's it.
Cool. Nick, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I assume the trick in question is XORing the path with the current node hash, and the result of that is that you can't support the full ETH protocol because you can't, when queried for a particular trinode without any context, you don't know what key to look it up by. The other thing worth noting is that actually it's with very high probability the trie is graph shaped because of the nature of the keys are all cryptographically generated. I can go into a more detailed proof if anyone's interested. So it may not actually even be necessary to do this in order to guarantee that it's graph shaped and therefore to avoid doing reference counting.
Yeah, Anton, did you have any comment on that? Or if not, you can take it offline with Nick if it's something to dive into a little deeper.
Yeah, I think we'll continue offline, please.
Absolutely. Are you on Gitter, Anton?
Sorry?
Are you on Gitter chat?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, great. If you could post in the All Core Dev channel and just put your Gitter name, and then Nick can know how to reach you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And yeah, sounds cool that you're doing interoperability there. Next, we have Ethereum JS. Is there anyone in here who can speak on Ethereum JS? Okay. Then we can move on to PyEVM. Or actually, Alex, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, the only thing I have to say is there hasn't been any significant work being done lately. It's Byzantium compatible, and that's where it stopped at the moment.
Okay. Sounds good. PyEVM?
Yep. So we largely just finished up a big GitHub migration, moving about 10 repositories from my personal GitHub onto the Ethereum Foundation GitHub. Lots of maintenance work. I haven't published information about this yet, but the repositories that were previously named Ethereum dash something are now all prefixed with ETH dash something to match, essentially matching the repository name, the Python library name, and the actual module import name, because there was some confusing stuff going on there. All that's generally done, and we're moved over onto the Foundation GitHub, which is nice. PyEVM specific, we're closing it. We're pretty far along at this point with the light client protocol. And a brief conversation last night, we are in a spot where we're pretty confident that we'll be getting a early alpha release of the actual client for PyEVM, which we are currently calling Trinity, released sometime soon. Soon being like a month, probably. Part of that's going to be implementing the JSON RPC specs. We're hoping to get integration with Hive going there. And the sharding research team has started implementation, moving their sharding implementation over to PyEVM. So part of that research starting on that code base, which is really nice to see.
Nice. Okay. Well, that's exciting. Congrats on all that. I don't think there's anyone here for PyEthereum or PyEthApp, so we'll move on from there. Anybody else have any? Oh, go ahead.
I kind of far away update. I know that there is stuff moving along with Casper Research, with Casper Testnet. I don't know exact specifics, but I know that there's been some trial runs and running the actual kind of Casper testnet using Ethereum successfully. So that's really cool to see happening in a real environment.
Yes, I saw there were some updates. The ones I know about are that there has been a successful testnet set up, closed environment obviously, for Casper, the Friendly Finality Gadget, FFG, which is Vitalik's implementation and ideation of Casper. And then there's also a repository called Casper, what is it? Oh, it's Vlad's Casper version, CBC maybe? Correct by Construction, that's right. So Casper Correct by Construction has a repository now, and some of the first coding implementation of that of that design. So if anyone's interested, the repositories I believe are under some name for Casper in the Ethereum repos. If anyone's interested in that, excuse me. So I think that's the last thing. Did anyone else have updates or comments on anything they're working on?
Yeah, so I'd like to mention that there is a guy, Thomas Danzak. He's been working on a C# client for Ethereum, and it's passing almost all state tests and VM tests. And yes, he reckons it's about a couple of more months of work to have it kind of complete. At this point, it's still a private repository. But if anyone is interested, reach out to me and I'll forward you to him. Also, I'd be curious to hear if Axic has any, if there's any interesting developments in either Solidity or EWASM.
Sorry, I wasn't catching the first half.
I was just wondering if you have any, if there's anything newsworthy updates about EWASM or Solidity.
Well, regarding EWASM, we have a roadmap lined out, and we aim to launch a preliminary testnet by end of January. And for that, we plan to do a get-together to work on the actual components. And that's going to happen in January. So fingers crossed for EWASM. And then regarding Solidity, there was a release made yesterday/today, which had a few tiny improvements. The biggest one really is the ABI, the fully implemented ABI decoding and encoding, which supports structs and everything which wasn't supported by the old ABI encoder and decoder. But in order to use that, one needs to specify an experimental flag. Then we are really focusing on the SMT solver in Solidity for the next release, as well as the intermediate language. I think those are the most important parts about Solidity.
Thanks.
Great updates. Is there anybody else who has an agenda item that's not on the agenda that they want to bring up? Any comments or questions or anything? Okay. Good meeting, everybody. I think we hit exactly an hour, and I've already made an issue in the Ethereum PM repo for Ethereum Core Dev Meeting 30. So if you already have in mind what you want to talk about in 2 weeks on the 15th, please put it in there. I don't have the live stream link up yet, obviously, but I do have 4 agenda topics, and I'd love for people to add more. So go ahead and get in there and add some stuff, and everybody have a great 2 weeks. We'll talk to you then.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.